Hello, it's good to be with you today. I'm Andrew Marquez, and this is the Baptist on the Bible podcast. Here is your 7 at 7 devotion, a 7-minute encouragement from Scripture offered every Monday and Friday at 7 a.m. And today we're going to finish this series out of 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. It's been called Humility, Our Gracious Garment. And it's a very exciting passage. We talked about the role of elders and those that are pastoring in the churches last time. And this time what we're going to be looking at is the response. And so we're looking at two things here. One is that we need faithful followers who will accept the authority that God has established. And we need reverent relationships. And so this is coming right out of verse 5. So let's go ahead and read that together and then we'll move forward. It says, "Likewise, you younger people, submit yourselves to your elders. Yes, all of you being submissive to one another, and be clothed with humility. For God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble." And so that is the text that we're looking at. Again, God gives grace to the humble, but He resists the proud. And so what are we to do? What we need to look at is, first, God has established leaders in the church. He has established those in authority. And Peter gave 4 verses of commendation to those who are leading to say you need to do this in a way that honors the Lord. But for those of us that are not in ministry leadership, we need to be obedient and submissive and learn from those that are in authority, recognizing that God has established authority. Authority lately has been getting kind of a negative connotation that everybody in power is somehow evil. There are people that have abused their power, but power itself is not evil. God has called us to respond in a structure that He established, and He is the chief, He's the king, He's the great shepherd, and everybody ultimately responds to His authority. But because God works through authority, we have to be ready to accept that authority. And so having an attitude of humility is one way that we do that. Romans 13:1 says, "There is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God." So God establishes the authority. Stephen Beck tells a story about a bridge that he found kind of in a remote area, and he had waited on one side of the bridge because it had a yield sign. And as he crossed the bridge, he kind of looked back and he saw that on the other side of the bridge was another yield sign. And so both sides were asked to yield to one another because it was a bit of a treacherous road. And I thought that was a great illustration in that, there are times that we need to be willing to yield. And even if you are in leadership, you need to be willing to yield again with the idea that who you lead ultimately is led by God. And so if you have an attitude of being puffed up and they need to move for me, you miss the example set by Christ. Remember, He is the suffering servant. He is the one who came to serve, to seek and save those that were lost. And so we need to serve as He served. We must recognize that authority, and youth in particular must be encouraged to yield. Psychology Today, Carl Pickard said that the ages of great rebellion really land between 9 and 13. There is something as we begin coming into our own adolescence and beyond into our adulthood that kind of works within us to say, where do I fit? What about me? And how do I establish myself? And that attitude, again, part of that is just growing up and becoming an adult. But we must remember that we are called to yield to those in authority and to honor our parents. And again, those that are our masters, those that are in charge of us, we have to honor them and respect them. And youth in particular are singled out because it is the young people that tend to think that maybe they know better, that the old guard hasn't figured it out. This is particularly challenging in light of the present world that we live in because technology has become such a significant part of life, and the young people tend to be more equipped with technology. It's more of a first language for them. And that can give an opportunity for people to be puffed up because, those old people must not know anything because they can't operate an iPhone or whatever device I'm working. That's an arrogance that we need to be careful with and be caution. I caution you because you don't want to puff yourself up. You need to listen to those that have lived life. And regardless that you might be good at some things that older people aren't good at, as a young person, you have to have this attitude, okay, someday I'm going to be one of those older people, and I expect I'll know more then than I do now. And so I need to be ready to listen to those in authority. We also, as parents, need to be giving our children the old drug problem of driving them to church, dragging them into the church to be before the ministry leaders that we have in our churches so that they will be equipped and they'll learn how to serve God. And seeing that relationship of serving parents and serving in the church and obeying authority as an obedience to God himself. We need faithful followers accepting authority. And then finally, we need reverent relationships among the redeemed. Okay, he singles out youth, but he also then says, you all, be submissive to one another, clothed with humility. For God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. All right, youth have a special singling out, but now it extends to everyone. And Peter says, all of us have got to make sure that we are having reverent relationships, that we're respectful of one another, and being clothed in humility. I kind of think of the emperor's new clothes. Remember that story of the emperor who was deceived into wearing an invisible cloak and ended up marching around naked and kind of made himself into a fool, but he thought he was in the most pristine of clothing. When we act irreverently, we are not clothed with humility, but we're clothed with shame. And we must make sure that we try and we seek and we do what we can to revere other brothers and sisters of Christ who are made in the image of God and to exhort and lift each other up. Finally, we have to embrace God's grace. When we are humble, when we are clothed in the humility that comes in the relationship with Christ, in the knowledge of Christ, in the attitude of Christ, we embrace the grace of God and we reject the pride. Luther says, although out of pure grace God does not impute our sin to us, he nonetheless did not want to do this until complete and ample satisfaction of his law and his righteousness had been made. Since this was impossible for us, God ordained for us in our place one who took upon himself all the punishment we deserve. We embrace that grace when we live in humility. I hope you'll do that. Take care and God bless.